I think we're all ready and set. So I would like to welcome you all here this afternoon to the European Policy Centre, both to those who have joined us in the room, but also to our online participants as well. We're delighted to have you with us this afternoon to discuss strengthening water resilience for wellbeing and industry, the role for EU policies and investments. My name is Danielle Brady, and I'm a senior policy analyst here at the European Policy Centre, and I'm delighted to be moderating this afternoon's discussion with our wonderful and esteemed panelists who are to my right here. And I'm delighted to be joined by Veronica Manfredi, who's Director of Zero Pollution at DG Environment in the European Commission. Also by Commission colleague from Buildings and Products in DG Energy, Niels Ladefoged, Paul Bourdillon, who's the CEO Europe and Central Asia from SUEZ, also to András, Edelényi, who's a member of the European Economic and Social Committee. And last but by no means least, we have Dr. Olivier Ejderyan, who's the lead Society and Innovation Group Research Institute of Organic Agriculture. So very much looking forward to hearing your inputs and insights over the course of the next 2 hours. This will also be an interactive discussion whereby we will also open the floor after we've heard from our panelists to those in the room and also online. So I invite those of you who are joining us online to already get your questions into the question box so that we can get as many questions as possible to our panelists. As I mentioned, this event is focused on strengthening water resilience for wellbeing and industry, looking at the role of EU policies and investments. And it's organised, of course, by the European Policy Centre, but kindly sponsored and supported by SUEZ. So we're very grateful for that as well. Water, as I'm sure everyone in this room is all too aware, is very much indispensable to life and key to a lot of what we do. It's key for our health, for our environment, but it's also very important for our economy. And it's the backbone of key sectors such as industry, agriculture, and also energy production. While we might think that water is abundant, the amount of usable fresh water, which is essential for the sectors I mentioned, remains limited and varies greatly in terms of its quality and its accessibility. This vital resource is under significant strain due to climate change and to environmental pressures, both globally and in Europe. In fact, droughts across Europe have occurred economic losses estimated at around 1 billion over the past 2 decades. So in a context and in light of growing geopolitical tensions, securing access to high quality water is becoming increasingly important for Europe for its industrial and energy transitions. It's vital not only for the traditional sectors that we may think about, but also for emerging technologies like battery production, semiconductor manufacturing, and hydrogen energy. And this is key as well, where we look at conversations regarding Europe's competitiveness, which has been key, of course, to the recent political guidelines by von der Leyen, but also in Mario Draghi's report. So water is a key component in these conversations, as it is in many conversations, of course, pertaining to our health and the environment as well. The European Union already has quite a robust water management framework in place, supported by several measures that I'm sure you're all aware of, such as the Water Framework Directive, the recently revised Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, the Sewage Sludge Directive, and the Water Reuse Regulation. However, there is growing consensus that much more must be done to address the evolving water crisis and to promote smart, sustainable water practices. So with this background, we will start today's discussion. And I will turn first to Veronica to get your thoughts and views on what are the key challenges related to water sustainability and what are the key and relevant EU policies that are addressing them today.
So first of all, really warm thanks both to the EPC and SUEZ for organizing this event, which comes extremely timely. I think it's fair to say that we're really going through a water moment, both because of human actions and because of planet actions. What do I mean? There has been really an increasing crescendo of things that have been happening in the water area. First of all, I would go back to March 2023, when the United Nations has convoked at the request of so many countries, and because there was really a thirst from so many countries, the second actually ever United Nations conference only on water to take stock of the degree of advancement of the water decade, a water decade that started 2 years in advance of the entire Sustainable Development Goal agenda. I think this speaks by itself. Without water, we're really nowhere. It was a very important moment because, as you know, it was in preparation of that United Nations Water Conference that all the member states of the European Union agreed and on a common position that was eventually presented by the European Commission in terms of saying our continent, the European continent, should become water resilient by 2050. We recognize this as a challenge. We see increasingly the different parts of our territory are being hit by water stress. And when we mention water stress, I always like to stress that really it's about too much or too little water. And when I say that the sequence of events is a sequence of events that sees both human actions and planetary action, is the fact that, as you are witnessing yourself, not only we've been going through the 3 hottest summers of the planet, 22, 23, 24, hottest temperatures ever recorded on the entire globe. The colleagues of the European Environment Agency have published in March 2024 the first ever European climate risk assessment, telling us that Europe happens to be the hottest and fastest becoming continent. So the continent then is warming up the fastest, something that may sound to some as a slap in the face, because, as you know, we are part of industrial actors. I think an increasingly minor part of the industrial actors, but they're still present, who claims that the European Union is killing itself by trying to decarbonize, but at the same time, you know, not other actors are doing enough around us. Well, nonetheless, the facts are telling us this is the continent that is becoming the hottest in the shortest time span. It's a fact. And we see an increasing number of our areas either flooded or hit by severe droughts. Last year, so we are still in 2023, has been the year in which the World Meteorological Organization has released a very clear statement saying, for the first time ever, the hydrological cycle of the planet is broken. The hydrological cycle of the planet is broken. And this means not just a little thing, but it means that you have to look at, in order to repair it, at both the blue and the green component. Today for me is a very special day because not only I am 2 days after the publication of the report of the European Environment Agency on the state of the EU water. So as a EU policy maker, I'm fresh, like all of you, I trust, with a lot of data about how well or not well our surface and groundwaters are. But also because this morning, the Global Commission on Water Economics has released a major report, which is the support of an enormous amount of high-level scientists and specialists, which is coming to the conclusion that if we don't change the course now, by 2050, we will have a problem because we will exceed by 40% the demand, the water demand, having regard to the available supply of fresh waters, by 40% globally. We will have over 50% of world's food production endangered. Already today, 30% of the food production globally is in areas which are exposed to increasing problem of water stress. And they've also calculated, I refer their data, I didn't have the time, I admit, to dive deeper into the analytics behind, that richer countries may face a decrease of around 8% of their GDP, and poorer countries up to 15% of their GDP. And they make a comparison. They say, think just of 2020 when the entire planet was hit by COVID. Intra-EU, we lost 3.5% of the GDP in those years. I think businesses know very well what I'm talking about, you know, 3.5. So imagine an 8% forecast. But in all this, what I find really beautiful is that, one, the perspective is 2050, the same we have chosen as European Union, to say we want to become resilient by then. And there is always this if, unless we change course of action. And we know what are the strands on which we can operate to change the course of action. If the global hydrological cycle is broken, at least from the European Union perspective, we certainly know that we have to look at the green water cycle, which is our nature, and we have a new nature restoration regulation. It has costed us some swear and tears to adopt it, but it's there, and it's even published in the official journal. And I want to congratulate all the efforts of all the European parliamentarians and, of course, colleagues of the member states, but also all of you as stakeholders who supported its adoption. We know that we have to become water efficient first, reduce the demand, following the splendid example, I think, that comes from energy policy, where we did manage at some time to realize that it was quintessential to deal with energy in a very cautious manner. And I think last mandate has been the mandate of becoming smarter in energy management as well. So let's anticipate as much as we can. Let's become also water efficient by design. And we have a lot of regulation on which we can already base ourselves. The water use regulation is there. It's already applicable in principle across all member states. We are not yet untapping its potential. We have champions in our industrial landscape, and certainly SUEZ is one of those, of which we are particularly proud. They operate both intra-EU and globally. But are we supporting our water industry enough in their attempt to be at the service of the rest of the globe that is facing similar challenges? I don't think so. And I was happy to see also in the later report that he recognized the increasing and also I would say excessive fragmentation of the water industry as one of the challenges to tackle. President von der Leyen has been very clear. By the next 100 days from the date of the entry into force of the next college, there are at least 2 documents that have to see the light: the Clean Industrial Deal and the Vision for Food and Agriculture. I would plead, let's secure that none of them comes out without a proper water chapter, and actually should be their very basis in my humble view. And also let's collectively work in order to showcase the enormous amount of clean and circular techs that are already in our hands as Europeans, as producers of 40% of the global patents on water technology. We should be proud of this fact. We are in the world the producer of 40% of water patents, the US 23%, Japan 12%. Okay, so we have the best brains. Let's help them. Let's transpose the know-how into techs that make sense to at the same time be clean by decarbonizing and depolluting and become efficient in the way we manage this indispensable resource. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, particularly for highlighting some of those figures which are stark and terrifying all at the same time, and looking at why we really need to act now, and there's no time to waste on this. And you also presented a lovely segue to our next speaker from DG Ener, who I will ask you to maybe reflect a little bit on what is the importance of water resilience for your work in the energy transition, which we know featured a lot in the previous mandate, and I assume will also feature quite heavily as we move forward. So it'd be great to get your insights into that.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. What's the importance of energy? I think, you know, we are nowhere without water, we are nowhere without energy. And we've seen that in the past, that sometimes water means we have no energy. And that's when there's too little water or too much water. Inundations, one of the first things that happen when you have floods and inundations is that people lose power. Just last week in the US with the hurricane, it was millions of people without power suddenly because of so too much water at any one time and place is a problem for energy supply and for very basic services of people, but of course also too little. And I remember distinctly that one of the first times I kind of started thinking about this was in the heat wave 2003 we suffered in Europe, where actually the nuclear power plants in France started to reduce generation because they had no cooling water. And so there's a lot of dependencies between water and energy, and it seems very wise to look at those things together going forward. Energy is hugely dependent on water, in particular for thermal power generation. It's one of the biggest sectors in terms of withdrawals of water, less so on pure consumption. But we're really dependent on water for cooling thermal power plants, be they fossil fuel power plants or nuclear power plants. To give an example, and that's perhaps a bit an extreme example, but in Poland, where, as you know, they're very dependent on coal-fired power generation. In the first 2 decades of this century, estimates suggest that abstraction for power generation was about 75% of all abstraction of water from surface waters in Poland. And that's going down, unfortunately. And this is, I think, one of the good messages I can bring today. We are on the right track. The objectives and the policies we're pursuing at EU level will have very positive, in the energy and climate field, are set to have very positive impacts for water, thanks to the substitution over time of thermal power generation. Particularly when it comes to solar and wind, they don't depend on on water to any serious degree, and that will reduce this problem we have with thermal power generation. Also, of course, reducing the role of combustion in power generation will reduce air pollution, which can also be a problem for water quality through deposition. We have also, of course, a very clear link with hydropower, which until a few years ago was the biggest source of renewable power in the EU. It's no more. It's been dethroned by wind power, and whereas wind power is growing relatively exponentially and set to grow a lot in the coming years as well, hydropower generation is pretty stable, has been basically flat throughout the last 2 decades. This said, it remains hugely important for the power system, and in the future that importance will be even more valuable, because hydropower and pump storage will be a very significant source of flexibility and storage capabilities in the European power system. And of course that, let's say, changes in the precipitation and so on can also affect that potential. Then, of course, we have biofuels, biomass, which also plays a big role in the energy system, and I'm sure we'll come back to that in discussion. So we have big dependencies and strong links, but I think we also have a lot of potential synergies, particularly in how we address these challenges. As Veronica said, we have really, let's say, clear synergies in terms of this efficiency first principle. In energy, we've long insisted on, for instance, metering and billing. I worked on metering and billing for energy, because if people don't know what they use and pay for what they use, they tend to care less. It's as simple as that. It's just a human fact. And so metering, including water, also to leak detect and so on. This is some of the things we've pursued in the energy sector. Smart metering, digitalization can really also be applied to some degree in the water sector. If we look at things like domestic hot water use in households and so on, if we can use efficient taps and shower heads and so on, that reduces at the same time energy consumption and water use. We have, if we use efficient products like washing machines, we can save both energy and we already estimate that eco-design and labeling measures at European level for washing machines will save in the hundreds of millions of cubic meters of water by 2030. And we, at EU level, we try to promote these kinds of measures, and we adopt regulations on products. Cool in terms of the kind of in the areas we're looking closely at now is, of course, things like cooling of data centers, where again there can be synergies, because instead of using consuming water to cool data centers, if you're clever, you can actually reuse that energy into district heating systems or industrial production systems. But it does require planning and does require an appropriate regulatory framework and prices that kind of incentivize the industrial players to get together and match these things up, because it's more complicated than otherwise. So things like planning, things like market signals, the right incentives, regulatory frameworks will be important to exploit those synergies, for instance, in industrial clusters and symbiosis. And then, of course, at company level, things like having energy management systems in place is something that tends to generate a lot of cost-effective savings, and that can work for water as well, other resources. We do have a lot of things on the law books already. The Energy Efficiency Directive that was adopted during this mandate, for instance, obliges public authorities to pursue savings, and that can include savings in water supply systems, water wastewater treatment systems, and so on. My team is in charge of EU regulations on efficient water pumps, so we try to contribute at that micro scale as well. So there's a lot to do. And to sum up, we're linked together like Siamese twins, and I think we'll see a lot of examples of how this can be exploited in terms of the policy response in this mandate too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, especially. Thank you very much for, in particular, for drawing those synergies. And I think any approach has to be joined up, because no one area or sector can address this by themselves. And I think we'll come to that a little bit later as well, in the discussion about the different sort of sectors and facets of society that need to come together in order to address water resilience. But on that, I will come to Paul and talking about addressing challenges. Perhaps you're the right person now to turn to, particularly when we think about innovative solutions for water management. So it'd be great to get your thoughts on that. So I'll hand the floor over to you now, Paul.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for organising this great event today. It's great to be here and be able to participate. I think the subject is an absolutely passionate subject. Even though Veronica said some very kind words about SUEZ, maybe not everybody knows SUEZ so much, but we are a company present worldwide in the water management and the waste management sectors, and we obviously participate in all different parts of the water and the waste chain. We have about 40,000 employees across the world, and we probably provide water to about 60 million people worldwide, and we produce maybe 8 terawatt hours of energy. So we can see also that link between water and energy and waste and energy in our businesses. And we're about a 9 billion euro company today. So just to give you a few ideas about who is SUEZ. Obviously, I don't want to repeat everything that Veronica said, but I think our analysis of the situation kind of fits with the urgency and the very serious situation that Europe is finding itself in today. Effectively, we can see water scarcity becoming bigger and bigger in many countries, and maybe some countries who 5 years ago didn't think that water scarcity was a problem now realize that it really is becoming a problem. But the flood side of things is also the same result of that climate change. So I think we strongly believe that this climate change issue is becoming bigger and bigger, and some countries in Europe where we still work probably haven't been as hardly hit by it at this point, but it's coming everywhere, and we are pushing to build more resilient structures across the different countries where we're working. And I think we would say it's very important that we all take a view, both in terms of quality of water, but in terms of quantity of water. Maybe in the past we weren't looking at both of those angles, but really going forwards, we need to look at both. And I think it's interesting also maybe what Niels was saying about some of the new industrial needs that are coming out, which are probably going to, on top of the negative effects of climate change on water availability going forwards, we're going to have maybe significant more water needs for data centers, for electric battery recycling, for producing hydrogen, et cetera, et cetera. So suddenly the demands on water for tomorrow are going to be even bigger. And coming to your point about how do we provide for food, et cetera, it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem every day. So I think we totally subscribe to that. And we believe that we need to look at all of the solutions. I think we would say that there's a number of different solutions, and we try to sort of put a hierarchy into what do we prioritize when we're trying to find solutions. It was interesting listening to Niels, because he's totally right. At the end of the day, energy and water are very similar, and it's not rocket science trying to find the solutions. They're kind of similar. So effectively, probably we would start off by saying, let's make sure we're efficient. Before we start bringing new water resources along, let's make sure we're not wasting the existing resources. So obviously we look at that, and we try to help our customers in two ways. One is on let's say the demand side. So how do we make sure effectively the demand is efficient? How do we educate customers across Europe into being more sensible in their consumption? How do we make sure they understand that the situation is becoming worse and worse, and the more we use up our water resources, the more we're creating a bigger problem for the future. And then it would be on the supply side, so managing those networks. So similar to electricity, I guess, is how do we make sure we have optimized networks? Obviously, this is something we do in many places. How do we reduce the leaks? How do we identify the leaks? How do we support our customers in effectively understanding that consumption where there's leaks? So smart technology, smart meters is something that we are implementing very strongly across Europe. But also artificial intelligence. I think there's a lot of work being done on artificial intelligence to be quicker and better in identifying leaks, repairing leaks, better planning the networks, optimizing the way we invest in the networks. So these are all key areas to preserve the existing resource. But even then, as we kind of said before, the reality is that even by doing all of that work to protect the resource is really under pressure. And this is where we would say, well, let's start looking at some of these alternative solutions. And I think water reuse has been mentioned a couple of times. I mean, I think it's interesting. We have the new urban wastewater treatment directive that is coming in, I believe.
Deal done.
And that involves probably a lot of investment for Europe in upgrading over the next 10 or 15 years, a lot of wastewater treatment plants, maybe going from secondary treatment to tertiary treatment to quaternary treatment potentially. So obviously there's a big challenge about how does that get organized, how does that get funded? But I think we can say that that's a big opportunity to really think about reuse. From our perspective, reuse is a massive opportunity to reuse a resource which is out there, which at the moment sometimes is not being properly treated, and hence leading to pollution when it's put back into the natural environment. And certainly is not being used as a resource that can substitute for drinking water. Obviously, we're not saying we should be providing drinking water or recycled wastewater to households, but if we look at all of the other uses, and really households is a small amount when you start looking at industry. When you look at the new industries, when you look at energy, which is consuming, I don't know, up to 35% of drinking water today, if we can find a way to provide high quality, and SUEZ can definitely support in doing that, if we can put in place treatment processes and solutions which allow us to properly treat using reverse osmosis, etc., treating at the same time maybe the micropollutants under the new wastewater treatment directive. This is a great opportunity to implement a solution and maybe free up and protect and secure for the long term a lot of drinking water resources which are maybe being overexploited today. So for us, we would highly, and it's the same story. We need to have the right regulation in place. We need to have everyone incentivized to put it in place. But we really believe that recycling is a great opportunity to protect the water resource. And there's other ways of using it as well. We can say one of our other expertise is what we call recharging the aquifers. So maybe you have overused aquifers that have been overexploited over time, that they're running out of drinking water. Well, we can also use our technologies, which have been implemented across the world, to say we take that treated wastewater and we re-inject it into the aquifer. It has to go through a barrier to make sure that it is a totally clean water by the time it reaches the aquifers, but it's a way of also rebuilding our water resources which are running out. So I think there's technologies out there, and there's capacities out there that we can really make a massive use of wastewater, which I believe today is the opportunity. Finally, I would obviously add that SUEZ is a a worldwide expert in some other technologies. For instance, we have built thousands of desalination plants across the world. So again, it's more expensive. It consumes a lot of energy, although probably today almost all desalination is built using, let's say, renewable energy. But nevertheless, where there's no other solution, where we cannot do better in terms of saving the water resource, where we cannot do better in terms of recycling wastewater, then we look at desalination as a potential alternative to produce extra resources. And obviously we can use it in a positive way. Maybe when we are recycling the brine, we can take the minerals and the resources out of it and recreate valuable resources. So all of these solutions should be thought of in a cyclical way. So for us, these are some of the examples of some of the things we can do to really better protect the water resource going forwards in a world of climate change. Final comment maybe on my side. Obviously, all of this costs a little bit of money. I think for us, if we want to implement these new solutions, if we want to make it work, we also need to really work on the financing side. How do we fund these solutions going forward? How do we put in place the funding required to do all of the work in wastewater, to push reuse, et cetera, really to make sure that we secure over the long term our water security is going to cost money. It's important that we've changed our thought process on it, as you were saying, Veronica, but we need to find a way to fund it as well. So for us, the challenge is also about how do we fund all of this change? And I don't know, some of the ideas that we hear about out there is maybe a European water fund, food for thought about how do we finance all of that. But clearly for us, it needs to be a key priority if we want to protect the futures of our children.
Thank you very much for bringing some solutions to the table, which is always a very important part of the discussion, and for also raising the issue of funding and financing, which I'm sure we will come back to in the discussion later on. But thank you very much for those remarks. András, I'm now going to turn to you and to find out a little bit more about the work that has been ongoing in the European Economic and Social Committee with regards to the Blue Deal initiative and how this links up to what we've been talking about, to water resilience, and how perhaps this could have an impact or provide some inspiration for future EU work on water resilience.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being invited. I had the honor to speak about our Blue Deal, about the main messages and principles of it, and also the industrial implications of it. So the first question is why Blue Deal? Especially during the 2022, we started to feel very strongly that the general approach toward tackling the general water problem is somehow not equipotential. Even Veronica said in her introductory speech, it's not only environmental issue. It's human, it's societal, it is business, industry, everything is touched upon. Even within the environmental aspect, it is not equipotentially treated. In most cases, we speak about warming, we speak about climate, we speak about pollution, but where are the other 12, 14 aspects of our friends from Joint Research Center who describes more or less the general footprint, the entire footprint of our activities and its water impact? So we said, the time is ripe. Let's start an overarching, very holistic approach toward the water problematic. And then we started the so-called EU Blue Deal topic. We immediately decided to split according to our internal operational sections, we call it sections, the issue, and we developed 7 opinions, 7 own initiative opinions, and a few months later, we put an umbrella over the 7th one and developed an 8th one. This was practically in the end, exactly 1 year ago, October last year. Then we launched a certain type of initiative, a campaign by teaming up with the European Parliament, with the other peer European Union institutions, and then announced the Blue Deal. In the meantime, the Commission announced also the Water Resilience Initiative, which was absolutely in parallel with our initiatives. Sorry to say, it was postponed and took over by the new, right now, coming up new Commission. I was told I can, yeah, thank you very much. And luckily enough, it is already very much emphasized in the new strategic program, priority program of Madame von der Leyen. And a few weeks ago, we already saw the new commissioner's portfolio, draft portfolio, to be discussed and decided. So there is a progress, although with some delay. Now, what is the latest initiative? As we are representative of the so-called organized civil society, employers, employees, other mixed civil organizations, there is an European Citizen Initiative becoming ripe in the meantime, and probably within 2 or 3 weeks, there will be launched the action with this one, which shows the growing level of awareness of the civil society about the real challenges and problems of the water. Okay, I don't want to go into more details, much more, just a few key principles, what it is about, the Blue Deal. By the way, just in brackets, even coming back just to 1 second to the non-equipotential dealing. The word blue itself was used before very much as a more or less equivalent with maritime. And then, excuse me, I'm coming from Hungary. In the middle of Europe, we were just looking jealously on the seaside countries. Our poor continental water guys, what is going to happen with us? Everybody is dealing with the seas, which is very important, of course, but we are lag behind. Nobody should be lag behind. Now, okay, so we think that it is an overarching transversal cross-cutting issue, deal. Water must be embedded in every single sectors, in every sectors in terms of vertical sectors, in terms of horizontal sectors, technologies, methods, and so on and so on. It's something like a checkpoint for every initiative. It's something like the SME check, like the competitiveness check. There must be also a water check. It was mentioned the financial aspect, and I'm sure it will come back even more. We tried to count altogether. There are some 17 different funds under EU umbrella, which deal directly, indirectly with water investments, reforms, and so on and so on. We see that there is a need for a harmonized, integrated, single turntable, which is accumulating, summarizing up all the different fundings which are available now. Data. Some member states are better off, some others are much worse off. Even those who are better off are informed, having data on their shallow underground water stock, as Paul mentioned, referred to on the stock and the over exploitation of this one, but much less deeper. And we feel, and we have already data that already pollution is over there, filtering in a little bit, and we have to count on their role in the total water household, as we call it sometimes. The innovation value chain, as it was mentioned also by Veronica, I think Europe is pioneering in patenting. What does it mean? That we are strong in every step, which is pre-patenting, which is basic research, applied research, maybe a little bit of technological research and so on, and then we try to defend it, patenting. And then, as we see, it's not only valid for water, excuse me, it's generally true for European innovation chain. Then there is a big valley, because we are generally poor in raw materials. And therefore, the innovation is flowing out a little bit of Europe. The piloting, scaling up, serial production goes somewhere else, where it finds better environment, better conditions. And then, if we are lucky, at the end of the day, the final production and the commercialization comes back to Europe. In water, we don't have to follow this, how should I say, this picture, this model, what is experienced in everything else. All in all, I don't want to go further in detail now. The President's declaration, so our President's declaration on the EU Blue Deal consists of 15 principles. Some of them I try to highlight for you, and 21 concrete actions behind, which are framed over there. Third issue is the industrial aspects. In the committee, we believe strongly that industry is certainly not only suffering from the challenges and the problems of the water question, but industry has the mission, responsibility to be a solution provider, because nobody else will offer solutions. It is only industry, business, and so on. That's why we are very happy to see together the water initiative, resilience terms, the clean industrial deal, thank you, and the new competitiveness deal. We recently issued an own initiative opinion. No, it was the Hungarian. No, it was the Hungarian presidency who demanded this opinion to analyze from a rather overarching angle of view the problematic of competitiveness. And we said, okay, we can analyze it, vertical sectors, ecosystems, and so on, as the Draghi report makes it 10, this one. There are the horizontal sectors, which are the different methodologies, technologies, and so on, which are more or less embedded in all or in most of the vertical sectors, digitalization, robotization, blah, 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 etc. But what is the most important analytical dimension is the competitiveness drivers. And among them, we identified the most important ones. Common market, innovativity, legislative business environment, fair access to key resources, and this one subdivided, critical raw materials, water, energy, skilled human, data, funding, financing, connectivity. So water must be in a very prominent position. Finance, we mentioned. Yeah, from an industrial point of view, the principle is reduce, reuse, recycle. We heard already very nice examples on this one. We identified in a follow-up report, it was already the 9th or the 10th, water-intensive industries and drives to water efficiency. And then we are working right now and in the next future on a detailed analysis what we should do and what we can do in terms of this one. Last remarks, what is the way ahead? As I mentioned, water resilience, water footprint, water demand and balance must be embedded in all other policies. It's a transversal issue.
I might just stop you there on that point because
I finish. All the stakeholders who are concerned by water, I think all of us must be aware, and their awareness must be raised, consciousness and motivation. Political ambition, funding, and toolbox behind. And we are ready to support this on our very specific way from the European Economic and Social Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that and for presenting the Blue Deal initiative, and picking up on one thing that was very strong throughout your remarks was the idea that water must be embedded in every policy, which really creates or sets out the importance of the nexus between water and other policy areas. And one such area, turning to you now for our final remarks, is that of food and agriculture. So it would be great to understand a little bit more from your perspective how that nexus can work and how we can build on the relationship between these different areas in order to ensure water resilience. So I'll hand you the floor now.
Thank you. Thank you also to the organizers for the invitation. May I just have the clicker, sorry, for the PowerPoint. Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks again for giving me the opportunity to present some reflection on the water, energy, food, and ecosystem nexus. We've heard a lot about collaboration need, cooperation needs at the policy level. They are here across all sectors. And luckily what we see is that, at least from a research perspective, that the importance of thinking in terms of nexus is really now here. I think it's present with most high-level policy organizations, and things are going on, and things have been going on actually for quite a while. And one of the needs today is to move forward from this nexus thinking to really try to implement it and try to show you through some example from the agri-food sector what this might mean. So the right one, yeah. So basically, several of the crises that have hit Europe in the past decade or so, and the rest of the world also can be considered actually as water, energy, food nexus crisis. So these are nexus crises, and they spread from one sector basically to the other. Think, for instance, of the Ukraine war. Okay, it starts as an aggression between one country and the other, and it moves forward to an energy crisis, to accumulated food crisis,
And from there on, it might have even long-lasting consequences on water. So if you think about all the countries thinking to revert their policies on intrants, on pesticides in order to meet food security needs. So we don't have an enough big time lapse at the moment to really evaluate the effect of this on waters, but we suspect there might be one. Think also, for instance, I think some of you have probably also witnessed it firsthand of the farmers' protest of last winter. I mean, even if it was not the only concern, energy prices were a significant element of these protests. And they also articulated really the way energy prices might jeopardize then food production, quality food production here in Europe. And what this highlights, basically all these elements, is that this crisis, this nexus crisis, they have a financial impact that has been underlined, but they also hit at the very foundations of life. They hit at what we eat. They hit at water that we need to live. And the report was already mentioned several times, the report on the state of waters, which was issued by the European Environmental Agency just 3 days ago. You might already have seen it, really identifies the agri-food sector as one of the main actors, if not the main actors, pressuring the water system, the European water system. And the responsibility of the agri-food system has really to be taken into account, and especially I think I want to stress it, underline it, the intensive conventional agricultural system, which plays an important role with all the nutrients and the pesticides that flow into our rivers. So actually, this is not news. I mean, the trends have been going on for several years. What is quite worrying is that except some areas, for instance, phosphates or so, where we see some improvements, the trends remain relatively stable, and there is not a great improvement in the quality of European, especially European surface waters in the past years. But this idea of thinking in terms of nexuses, of the water, energy, food nexus, is not totally new, actually. It has a 30-year-old history. I mean, if we think about the integrated water resource management framework, I mean, many have said the WEF is just, well, new wine in old bottles. I mean, it's maybe quite critical, but what I want to stress here is that there is 30 years of experience in cross-sectoral cooperation around water. There have been actually quite also some successes. I think about the Commission for the Protection of the Danube, which really fostered also, I mean, not only trans-sectoral, but also trans-boundary collaboration across countries that at that time were also not necessarily all part of the EU. And things moved forward. I mean, there have been improvements. But I think the integrated water resource management framework also showed some limits. And I think the limits of this framework are really what is at the core of the issues we are dealing with today. And these are namely that until now, most of this nexus thinking was still subordinated to the need of, or to the water sector needs. And while these needs are crucial, and I would say they are really central, there is also a need to decenter sometimes when we are looking at solutions to improve the state of the water resource in Europe. The second issue I saw with the IWRM framework is that it has a given scale. Basically, it thinks in terms of basin, which can be larger, smaller, but which basically impose the space in which the different actors are enrolled into stakeholder engagement, but also think with. And what I would like to illustrate with just a couple of spotlights on existing solutions from the agri-food sector, and especially what agroecological and organic approaches have to bring, is that if we think at other scales, even way larger or way smaller, we can also contribute from other sectors to a sustainable management of Europe's water resource. And here, two of the examples I want to stress. One of them, the first picture on the upper side, is agroforestry. Agroforestry is basically a practice that sees or that wants to give more space to trees within agricultural systems. It comes with a lot of benefits, a diversity of revenue, so an economic aspect for small farmers. It enhances biological diversity. But the roots are also a way to capture and stabilize and keep water resources at a given site. So we are sort of also, by multiplying this type of solutions, moving away from a flow and stock paradigm in water management in agriculture. That's one of the solutions, a nature-based solutions. The second solutions, which we are currently implementing at FiBL, it's maybe less visible, is a more technical one, agrivoltaics, namely the combination of photovoltaic production and agricultural production. So it's not the idea of just giving agricultural land away for photovoltaics, but to have a two-layered production system where the panels are basically protecting the crops, bringing shades. And current research shows that it has actually very positive effect on the biodiversity on a given site. What we are also experimenting with at FiBL is to keep and catch the rainwater on the panels and to divert it into a localized water management system. And here we can really see these positive synergies that can develop of such solutions. So the idea is here to say we need to move really from this level of nexus thinking, just coordinating, contacting stakeholders across sectors, to finding concrete solutions where we bring the actors together and where they can work together on making this nexus live. And finally, a last slide, also with a solution, yet not one that we are implementing ourselves, I wish. And a few words also to close on how to basically foster this nexus doing. The first idea, and I think it was already mentioned previously by András, there's this idea that we need toolboxes, I mean, concrete solutions that can be combined with one another that are here available for all the actors. This needs really to be pushed forward. It's also a call, I mean, we need to prioritize nature-based solutions in order to arrive at this management, but not close ourselves into this. Also think about synergies when there are strong synergies possible with very technical solutions. And finally, we need really to foster this nexus doing. So it's not just about engaging the stakeholders, it's also about learning how to work across sectors. I mean, a concrete example, when someone from the construction sector wants to buy bio-based materials in order to isolate housing or so on, the structure of buying is just not the same in the agricultural sector and in construction. And sometimes it really stops at very concrete things like this. It's not the question of the availability of the material, but just this finding a common way of working together. And finally, the idea is to really create these restorative connections between all the actors to protect our water resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, especially for highlighting the need to go beyond just thinking about nexus, but also to actually having concrete solutions that bring together the various sectors and actors as required. I'd like to thank our panelists for their opening statements. And I'm now going to turn to the floor to have a response and initial reaction from Sara Johansson, who's a Senior Policy Officer for Water Pollution Prevention at the European Environmental Bureau. So Sara, it would be great to get your thoughts and reactions to what has been mentioned here by the panelists, and perhaps any further questions or insights that you would like to share.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a broad set of sectors represented here, from agriculture to energy to urban use of water. But I think we need to remember that this water is provided to us from freshwater ecosystems. And these are the ecosystems that are providing us with this service. And the EA report that was mentioned several times today showed really clearly that the status of our freshwater ecosystems is still not good. We are a quarter of a century into the implementation of the Water Framework Directive, and still less than 40% of our surface waters are in good status, good ecological status. And yeah, it's clear that the freshwater habitats are in the center of the pollution, climate change, biodiversity crisis, and freshwater species are among the most threatened. In terms of water resilience, that was also mentioned, these ecosystems also play a role, and I agree fully with Mr. Olivier, on the need to implement nature-based solutions. They are a great toolbox to store water in the landscape, because that is really crucial in terms of both mitigating drought and floods. So in terms of water resilience, that's really what we hope to see at the heart of the water resilience strategy that we're all waiting for, to put this at the heart of the strategy. Efficiency was also mentioned, water efficiency first, as we've done with energy efficiency. Of course, this is crucial. We have technological solutions, but I think we also need to go further, especially in water-stressed regions, and also talk about net zero water savings, because we know from experience that many times when we have investments in energy and water efficiency, the efficiency gains are eaten up by new irrigation systems. So in the river basin management plans, that's where we can do this planning on how much water is available, also taking into account the effects of climate change on water availability, and do a proper allocation of water among different users, but also to ensure sufficient water for nature. Maybe finally something on pollution, because it also plays a huge role in the area of water resilience. It's a driver of biodiversity loss, but also a driver of water scarcity. We know that we already have cases where drinking water or tap water is not drinkable because of contamination, most notably by agriculture. And again, coming back to the report from the EEA, also show that still agriculture remains a key pressure on both surface and groundwater, both in terms of abstraction, but also pollution. And on this note, I think, again, we need to be thinking a bit holistically on this topic, and especially in the era of climate crisis, reflecting again on, yes, efficiency, efficient nutrient management, but also the net use of fertilizers, pesticides, etc. And I think there was a report out from the Commission's Joint Research Center last year that showed that if we want to meet the EU goal of cutting nutrient losses in half by 2030, we would need to reduce fertilizer use by 60%. Of course, this is daunting, and it's only achievable if we switch, yes, to agricultural and agroecological and organic practices, but it needs to come with a shift also towards less meat-based diets. So it's a matter, again, not only about efficiency, but also the net use of our resources. So I don't know how long I was given for this comment. I could go on, but we should probably give others the floor as well. Thank you.
I think that gives us plenty food for thought as well, and to hear your thoughts and reactions to what has been said. Speaking of giving the floor to other people, we'd also be very eager to get questions both from those online. So I'd invite our online participants to put the questions in the question and answer box. And also then from the room, I can see we already have a question. So maybe we'll go to that, and then we'll come back to the panel as well for some further reflections on what has already been said. If you can just highlight your name and organization as well, and your question.
Not sure. Yes, it works. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Basagni. I'm with the European House Ambrosetti. As an Italian think tank, we obviously work a lot.
Can you just no, just maybe speak a little bit louder, and also just repeat your organization, because we just didn't get it here.
Oh,
thank you.
Yes, it's the European House Ambrosetti. So I was saying, as an Italian think tank, we work a lot on water and food and the nexus between the two. Appreciated a lot all your contributions. I have a couple of questions for Olivier. Thank you for bringing some concrete examples to the table. I want to know, first of all, if you have any data about to what extent the examples of, let's say, like new practices are actually implemented. First one. And the second one, I was wondering to what extent the irrigation sector plays a role in water management, especially in this type of like more innovative water management systems. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions at this time? If not, we can go back to the panel, and then we'll open up the floor again. The question was directed directly at you, so I'll allow you to answer.
Thanks a lot for your question. So on this type of initiatives, we don't have at the moment so much data. I mean, there are rather coming. I mean, agroforestry, yeah, maybe there is some. I just don't have it right now in mind. At some point, in terms of the water stress, I will also respond with some anecdote, but there is a question with the dynamics of the anecdotes. I mean, our institute is based in Switzerland. I do most of my research there, and we have no wineries in the cantons of Geneva. Again, think the Alps, and so who are taking out the wines to plant olive trees, and this is not just something they do out of fashion. It's ahead thinking in their perspective. And as I say, these are still anecdotal, but at some point the anecdotes multiply, and you don't know when you're really in a deep dynamic. Does that answer? Yeah. How would you repeat it then?
Yes, the second question was about the role of the irrigation sector in these new type of solutions. You know, you mentioned, for example, gathering water through solar panels. And I was wondering how plugged in is the irrigation sector in this type of new solutions, and if they can be a player.
So they can definitively be a player, and these are actually quite central solutions, because we still have an issue with basically bringing gray water in the food system. And here it's a direct capture of rainwater, for instance, with the panels. When we think about agroforestry here too, I mean, the irrigation sector will have an important role to play, and we have to really think also of how to re-inject or how to divert water that are in root systems to irrigation, basically networks, and here, I mean, that it's things that are going on at the research level, to my knowledge, and are not yet implemented at large scale. But I know there are things in Central Europe and so on.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come in on that point? Yep, Veronica.
Just briefly to comment that actually, and I would like to commend the effort right now through the Water-Wise EU campaign, of which you see a poster here. We are collecting across European Union a number of very tangible, practical examples that are going on. So I'm tempted to reply to the colleague from European Ambrosetti House. There is a lot actually which is being rolled out, but it's being rolled out in a little bit scattered and fragmented manner. I think even if we ask the colleagues here from SUEZ, who are working with an enormous amount of municipalities across across the EU and beyond, there are plenty of examples. I'm aware myself of some of the examples that I have been championing, which, by the way, indeed try to connect the waste management with the water and energy nexus, come to examples of district heating, as Niels was suggesting. But the reality is, as Niels said himself in his intervention, it's a little bit on an ad hoc basis, local, depending on the goodwill of the mayor. And I'm happy to be also the director in charge with the Green Cities policy of the DG Environment. So I can testify to the fact that it's refreshing to see that there are mayors, there are some provinces, there are some regions that really have understood the challenge and try to innovate, but they're still not mainstream. And this is where we are right now. It's like, you know, the species, which is us, mankind, starts to understand that there is a problem, but we have to create a critical mass that transforms what is a problem into a truly transformative change across the board. And this is why it's important to have these type of meetings, because each of us, we are, and you all have your own role, including on social media, please, and whatever communication activities you can drive, to change the mindset. First of all, here I'm very happy to concur with Paul Bourdillon. I think there is a change of mind that is going on, but we really have to push collectively into that to facilitate this nexus thinking. And I agree with Niels, at some stage, there should be also better agreed regulatory framework. As you understand, as European policymaker, this is an extremely difficult challenge. Let's face it, the treaty puts even a limit to the possibility for the European Commission to discipline land use planning. But the reality is that climate change, and if you read the Ukraine report, it's recognizing very clearly that one of the critical challenges is how to make sure that we become better in spatial planning, so a national sovereignty of our member states, because it's there that you can create the win-win opportunity. So the Commission is already trying to work hard in order to promote tools, identified areas, make use of digitalization to assist. And I think there is also scope for us to do much, much better service. But I think we are really at the borderline of what should happen in that field to, you know, make mainstream what is too much of a niche yet.
Yep. Anyone else want to come in on that? If not, I'll ask if there's any other questions from the floor. Yes, we have a question here. If we could get a microphone at the top of the room. Just a microphone here at the top, please, Anna. Thank you. And again, if you could just state your name and organization, that would be great.
Thank you very much. Does this work? Yeah. So Lucas Reper from DG Environment. I would have a question to Paul Bourdillon. It's not that often that you can ask a CEO of a great European company a question. My question would be, doesn't it work?
If you just hold it closer.
I really have to swallow it.
Yeah, it has to be quite close to be heard.
Sorry about that. So it's about competitiveness. So Winston Churchill once said, never waste a good crisis. We are in a water crisis. Is there something that in this crisis the European water industry can take out of it to improve its competitiveness worldwide? And what would it take to improve our competitiveness, considering that we invest every year millions and millions in research? We have great startups with excellent universities. As András said, we have the big slump in the middle. The startups suddenly disappear. They go to America, they go elsewhere. What can big corporations like SUEZ do to help these startups grow and to become competitive? Is this something that you have in your strategy? And how do you see European competitiveness in the water industry? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'll hand the floor over to you to answer that one.
Thank you for that question. I think it's obviously quite a complex subject, but I think there's maybe many facets to the question. I think that one of the items is what Veronica was saying just before, is that today, effectively, SUEZ, for instance, is dealing with thousands of municipalities across Europe in terms of developing a water policy. I think we would say things like, where we're dealing individually with small municipalities who don't necessarily have the skill set, it makes the whole process more complicated. Where we're dealing with bigger municipalities, you can see already on their side there's more capacity, and therefore already the solutions that we're finding together are more developed and maybe where you have national policies, where you have regulators in place who can support the sector, because we can do a certain number of things, but I think it's about both sides. It's about having partnerships that work and work in the interest of the sector. So maybe I would insist on strengthening regulations in place, because that can certainly help. And where we have standardization, we have big thinking about solutions, as opposed to maybe just dealing with individually municipalities of a few thousand people. I think that can definitely change things. In terms of supporting startups, I think that's a key priority for SUEZ. I would dare to say on that subject, if we come back a little bit on the subject of innovation, which my illustrious colleagues were mentioning, I think I would like to say it's a sector where there's some quite good innovation from European companies. I don't know exactly how many patents SUEZ is producing per year, but it's in the hundreds, I believe. So we have about 10 research and development centers across the world, to be honest, working on new technologies, working on new solutions. And I mentioned some of the things we're doing, but obviously we're thinking about the future. The wastewater treatment directive talks about treating obviously micropollutants, which is something we've been working on for a while, and some countries in Europe like Denmark and Switzerland had already been implementing some of these things, and so we've been developing solutions. But obviously the next one is PFAS, and this is already the sort of thing that we are working on to think about the best solutions. So in terms of innovation, we are working very hard, and I would say sometimes we're doing it internally, but a lot we're doing it in partnerships with universities, with startups. So certainly for us, there's a real importance to involving third parties, making sure that the public sector, the private sector, the universities, and the startups are all working together to develop the new solutions. And I think that's a key part of our strategy. And effectively, the more we can support that, I think the better for everyone. But I think Europe, and I don't want to name any competitors, but I think Europe is quite creative in terms of finding new solutions to water. So we need to keep pushing that, because effectively, SUEZ has been there for 160 years, but we've been working on new solutions and new ideas for 160 years, and we will keep on going. In terms of competitiveness, I think that's our challenge. We are working hard, but I guess the more everyone realizes that we are in a crisis moment, the more everyone realizes that we do need to all deal with these problems. And having all of you here in agreement with what Veronica is saying and pushing it and making it really top of the agenda, and the comment that has been said about water is at the base of everything. It's a pleasure to my ears, to be honest, to be hearing that, because it's something that we've been trying to say for a while, but really hearing everyone saying, no, look, all of these subjects we're talking about, how are you solving them if you don't have your water? Obviously, everyone talks about the energy, but we need the water for all of these subjects. So the more we put it to the top of the agenda and everyone thinks about, well, we need water for this, we need water for that, we need water for this, health, et cetera, because for me, health is also key. And when we're talking about treating wastewater, it's absolutely fundamental. So the more we have it at the top of the agenda and everyone understands we need to solve our water problem, I think you'll have a bigger focus and it'll bring new ideas. At the moment, maybe there's not that many people focused on water. The more we get everyone focused on water, the more there'll be good ideas and we'll become better and more efficient. And I think we are maybe ahead of some other countries, Europe today in this area, and so we should keep that advance. But it's just an opinion.
András, yes, you want to come in?
May I just elaborate a little bit on what Paul says? Directly to the question, innovation. I think there are two things key. The first one is to fill somehow this gap, this volley between the very early and the very late phases of the innovation chain. And from this point of view, two aspects are key. The first one is the investment environment, and the second one is the legislative environment. The Draghi report says, the Letta report says, we experience it every day, that the US conditions are, for the time being, much more inspirative on these two fields. The second one, the second remark is to the topological, spatial fully. The best example for spatial planning is the water. Water must be planned in a water basin base. It's not country borders. It's not. What do we speak about? Our surface waters in Europe are 60% cross-border waters. So cooperation is inevitable. Consciousness and realization of consciousness is not only important on an individual level, but on a member state level. We are fragmented. A certain level of coherentization of the legislative environment is necessary because we are interlinked between each other while the legislative environment is fragmented, scattered. But we have to hit the right balance somewhere in between, not to overburden any legislation, regulation, and policy framework, because in that case, exactly the motivation will be lost. What should be built up through the recognition and acknowledgement building.
Go ahead, Niels.
Thank you. Yeah, let me make 2 points on competitiveness. The first one is, I think, one I feel almost obliged to make as a good Commission official, and following also Draghi's remarks on this, the value of we should not forget the value of the single market. There's a reason why people thought about this already, 40 years ago. If doing things at a unified level for 500 million people can make things simpler and address some of the skills challenges we have out there on the ground, and make it easier for businesses to devise solutions that are, affordable. And this is something we in a field I work on in eco-design and labeling really observe. We observe that European appliance manufacturers love our regulations. They would like more, because it makes it easier for them. They don't like that each member state regulate their own requirements. And take a water example on there is now discussion about filtering water from washing machines for microplastics. And so some member states are putting in place regulations on that. But then others may make different regulations or none. And then the manufacturers have to provide solutions that are specific to each market. If we instead can regulate this kind of thing at the European level, the manufacturers are happy to oblige and deliver solutions. So the value of the single market, let's build on that. The second one is about the location. And, if you try to grow lettuce in a desert, you're just structurally at a competitive disadvantage. And if you look at an example from the energy world, there was a reference to batteries production earlier. And one of the early attempts to actually make large-scale battery production in Europe is these days having hard times, and in that sense, it's perhaps not the best example, but it's in northern Sweden that one of the biggest, and there's a reason why it was put in northern Sweden, because there's ample access to cheap energy. And so we need to accept that remain competitive and have industry that's competitive globally as well in Europe. We need to think about where those industries and manufacturing plants are located and the uses. So if you depend on a lot of water, you should think about twice before locating in a place where there is no water.
We have 2 questions here, and then we have a third one here, and then we have one online. So we'll take these 3 together.
It's just to respond, sorry, to your competitiveness with location. What do you think, for example, of hydrogen, where you want to do European produced renewable hydrogen, you have to do it where there's lots of sun, but usually when there's lots of sun, there's not a lot of water. Sometimes there's really a non-correlation between the need and the actual location. It was just an example that mentioning it, but it's very difficult sometimes to have that perfect correlation of place and competitiveness.
There's another alternative, wind. There are areas where there's lots of winds and lots of water.
Okay, and we'll take the question at the.
Excuse me. And geothermal energy is almost everywhere.
Okay, go ahead, Sara.
Thank you. Yeah, staying on the buzzword of today or on competitiveness, because the Draghi report was mentioned, and it's also asking for targeted updates of key European environmental legislation, including the Water Framework Directive. And of course, I think there is a risk to look at the different crises we're facing in a very narrow way, going for decarbonization without thinking of pollution, biodiversity loss. So my question for the speakers is, how is your vision for competitiveness in Europe, and how it can be done while safeguarding environmental regulation?
Thank you very much. And we'll take the following question as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya Pencheva, and I'm from Xylem. It's a global water technology company. I just have an observation or a call to the policymakers, and also a question to Veronica. Well, first on the observation, I mean, Veronica, you mentioned very well that actually we need to be very coherent in what we do. And you're hoping, and we hope as well, to see a water chapter in the Clean Industrial Deal, the vision for agriculture, but we're not sure this is going to happen. So maybe a call to you and also Niels and the different DGs, if it's possible to have this coherent narrative and coherent approach to water in the Vision for Agriculture, Clean Industrial Act, and the water resilience strategies. Well, there are many more strategies that are coming out, but this is going to really help. And of course, we as stakeholders will knock on doors, but we cannot knock on all of the relevant doors. So it's really a call there, but also in regard to the multi-annual financial framework discussions, because we are calling for dedicated water funds. But what about this new competitiveness funds that will be launched? Is water going to be considered there at all? And we are kind of doubting that, probably as a first premise. So again, looking at it from all perspectives and coherence for water. And the question to you, Veronica, is that we were very excited to see digitalization of water proposals of the water sector in the mission letter to the new commissioner designate. So do you have some more information of what the thinking is or what we could expect? That will be quite interesting. Thanks.
Perfect. Veronica, I'll hand over to you to answer that question directly, but also the question as well in relation to competitiveness in Europe, while also safeguarding environmental standards.
So somehow both questions, I look at them as very much related, because if coherence is at stake, and we need two ingredients, coherence and full awareness of what we do. And I think that this is also the key of the reply to you, Tanya. We are living in a world where I think to an extent, not everyone yet is fully aware, those who are in good faith, but I also believe there is quite a certain doses of bad faith. I think 2 days ago, someone published the Shell and Exxon papers dating back the 1970s. It was the beginning of the fossil fuel production, and the scientists, expert of both companies, were predicting that the use of fossil fuel at large scale would have significantly disturbed the meteorological, I would today say, hydrological cycle. It was known. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. So we live in this type of world, and we should not be naive. So I would say at the end of the day, it's also a little bit of the individual choice of each of us as citizens, each of us as workers, and each of us as CEOs of companies, as directors of large startups, to decide on which camp of history you want to be. But of course, the paths are always possible for everyone. Our duty as policymakers here is to try and speak based on science. And I think the science has hardly ever been more consistent, clearer, and it's not just a science of geologists, hydrologists, biologists, but it's also a science of economists. Personally, and I don't have a problem in saying it publicly, the Draghi report is not a commission report, and Draghi is someone I deeply admire also as an Italian citizen, I was disappointed by his report when it comes to the water dimension. I think his report completely misses the risks of water for the entire economy. And I regret this. I mean, I have to take account of this fact. So can I give you any guarantee about the coherence of the products coming from the European Commission? No, I can't. I'm just one part of the machinery. But I'm extremely happy to sense, I would say, mounting consensus around me, increased awareness about the fact that we need to secure this coherence. I think President von der Leyen recognized herself this call for coherence as an important component of the way in which the next college, which has to focus more also on implementation of what we have adopted, will have to deliver. So I'm inspired by the fact that their own political guidelines are clearly putting the Clean Industrial Deal, the vision for agriculture. We have a report by Professor Strohschneider that I would say, contrary to the Draghi report, really identifies the triple planetary crisis as the center of the attention for driving agriculture towards sustainability. I'm inspired by the fact that I see a lot of ingredients that allow us, if you are united, and I would say also united against those, in my view, minoritarian but extremely powerful forces that try to split us as a camp, starting with the fact that we should interpret the word clean as decarbonizing and depolluting. How can you have something that is clean when it contains PFAS, but maybe it's cutting greenhouse gas emissions? From a water perspective, it doesn't make sense because your aquatic ecosystems are damaged. The figures of the EA are telling us that today we have less than 40% of the surface water in good ecological status, but would we, by a magic wand, and maybe these magic wands exist, by the way, among the various patents we have around that scientific knowledge in botanical systems, but would we have this magic wand of getting rid of mercury from fossil fuel combustion, PFAS, polyaromatic carbon, and brominated flame retardants, these are all ubiquitous persistent substances, 82% of our surface water would be today in good status. So you understand that this is clean as well, not just the greenhouse gas. Of course, you see mercury means good byproduct of decarbonization, but you have to tackle certain type of pollutants really with a special attention, not get distracted by these silent killers, indeed, of the entire ecosystem support. Thanks. MFF, sorry, I cannot stay. And the digitalization. MFF, as you can imagine, I mean, it's really early times. I think that what is important for us is to focus on the call for simplification. I belong to the camp of saying, of those who believe that it's a very good idea to try and streamline the architecture of the MFF. I don't know whether it would be necessarily a good idea to have a dedicated fund for water. Then you can argue, why don't you have really a dedicated fund only for energy and then a dedicated camp for critical raw material and a dedicated. So I don't know. I think that you need to have an approach that enables an easier tracking also of the spending that is done, that is also at the service of water investment, etc. Because there we have by now pretty clear figures about how big is the gap, better tracking of the progress made, and I would say mainstreaming actually this as something that should appear across all the revamped pillars of the next MFF, but we are at an early stages. And on the digitalization, read it very much in line with also what András was saying, and in line also for the general call for administrative simplification and reduction of burden, where of course also Commission designate Jessica Roswell is called to try and unleash the potential of existing regulations and see whether either targeted legislative changes are further needed or simply accompanying non-legislative proposals are needed that make it simpler even to track and report the data that we have on water and so many other fields. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before coming to our audience in the room, again, we have a question online, and I think, Niels, it's aimed towards you, and it's about a question concerning trade-offs. How can necessary choices be made between water cleaning and energy consumption, efficiency and emissions, if not full green energy is available? And this question comes from William Garcia online.
Yeah, that's a tough one and a big one. I tend to be of the view that we should start perhaps doing what's actually where the synergies are, focusing more on the synergies. As I said, efficiency, there's a lot of synergies, obvious synergies. We've heard about synergy between solar PV production here and agriculture, and there is so much out there to. And we could, I mean, a good place to start is sometimes to just start, stop working against ourselves. Today, the Commission has published guidance on the implementation of a new provision under the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive about phasing out of incentives for fossil fuel, heating solutions. And this is just one good example of where we're still shooting ourselves in the foot. There are still member states who provide incentives to the lowest cost fossil-based heating technologies. We should stop that before we then think about how we could get even further. And there are many places where we're working against ourselves and where we're making it more expensive. We're implementing the solutions more expensive because we're actually not coherent. We're somewhere else working against it. So I think there's so much scope for if we focus on the synergies and stop working against ourselves.
I think that's very clear from input from all of our speakers today, is really the importance of those synergies and working to enhance them as well. I'll now turn to the floor again. I think we had a question on this side somewhere. Perhaps not, no longer a question. Are there any other questions? Yes, we have one at the front here on the right.
Thank you. My name is it on? Yes. Thanks.
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Moniri from the German Engineer Association, especially from the sanitary industry. And my question is regarding around the topic of water resilient society, which I think we need in order to implement all these policies. Where do you see the importance and the role of water in buildings? May it be households or schools, airports? Because on the one hand, these are very sensitive areas where we are all in touch with water every day, where we can teach people how to be more responsible, where we also have the synergies with energy. I think one of you mentioned the shower caps, but also for water quality. So where do you see the importance of these areas, and do you think it's the focus of water in buildings is strong enough currently in the EU water policy?
Yeah, before going back to the panel, are there any further questions? Perfect, we'll take that one about water and buildings. I'm going to look at you again. And then we can hand over to some other people in the panel that would like to come in on this topic.
I don't know. We have an energy performance of buildings directive. We're not water, but I personally think it's sometimes about making it easy. I think in Belgium, Brussels, there's quite a lot of promotion of rainwater, tanks and reuse in private residences and so on. And I think there's a lot of goodwill to do that. But then if you actually look into it, often you will stumble over the cost or the difficulty of putting it in place, and perhaps the regulatory requirements of putting it in place in your private home, and you just get stuck. So I think in buildings, a lot of it is about making it easier and more affordable to actually implement the solutions. And there I swivel a bit back to trying to work together. We don't have a rainforest of rules, but we have, to the extent possible, harmonized and simple rules that focus on the essentials. I mean, I don't know. I've also seen there are startups now I think in France that start promoting, developing shower water recovery. I have myself a shower heat recovery that recovers the heat from the shower I take, which reduces the energy, but it doesn't affect the water consumption. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we, in a few years from now, see a shower water recovery more extent. And again, if you can do it in a practical and relatively affordable way, I think people would be ready to consider that.
András, you want to come in on that? Yes. Or?
If you allow me to put your question in just a little bit wider context. It is a ever recurring question now concerning reducing, reusing, recycling the principle. I wouldn't say different qualities of water, but different grades of water, different types of water. In other words, we should use that grade of water everywhere where it is the most suitable, the most efficient, the most fit. From your question's point of view, household is a relatively more simple territory because households are mainly related on pure, fresh, sweet water. It's clear. As far as I know, there are some initiatives, as also Niels mentioned, to try to utilize gray water, which is the relatively not dirty, so purer effluent of household, which still can be used for some purposes. A little bit further and wider, this gray water could be also applied for some industrial, etc., other applications. In terms of industry, there are examples, good examples for utilization of different grades of water. In our opinion, dealing with it, we found a very good example from Spain, where they have a pulp and paper factory. As we know, this is one of the intensive sector, whereby originally, I don't know, years ago, they took the linear approach. So they took the fresh water and they released the effluent used for the paper manufacturing. Now they completely changed not only the mind, but the technology, and they are able to take purified industrial water, which is not drinking water, but purified industrial water, and they recycle it 13 times the same amount. So this is maybe just one example, but there are certainly some other ones that how different grades of water can be used. The difficulty is not coming here. The difficulty is coming from the standardization, the description, the quality definition, and so on. And this is more targeted applications, not wide range supply systems.
Paul, if you want to come in here?
Yeah, maybe I'll just add. I think we would say the same households still represents, even if it's absolutely urgent and strategic, it represents a small share of total water consumption, as you were kind of saying, about 10% exactly. We're talking about 10%. A lot of the water is being consumed for agriculture or for industry, and this is why we would effectively push a lot more on trying to recycle water for agriculture and industry where it's much more economically feasible, or even for running parks and gardens and other potential municipal needs. But for households, it's complicated. What we would say instead, though, is obviously we should still be very carefully managing consumption of households. And so for us, we would say two things. Number one, as I said before, smart metering is very important. The more we can smart meter everyone, so maybe in a lot of places, some places you don't have smart meters or meters at all. Some places you have 1 meter for the whole building, which means that in reality, people are not responsibilized in terms of their consumption. So for us, we would push to have every single individual household having their own meter consumption, and that will really focus them much more on how much they are consuming. And the second point we would make is, and obviously this is not for us to decide, it is our clients that focus on these things, but we are very much in favor of tariffication systems, which also incite to we all believe that there's a minimum amount of water that every person, every household needs to consume to live. And so therefore we believe that that should kind of be at a very, very sensible tariff. On the other hand, people who are over consuming, we believe should be charged significantly extra. There should be different tariff bands to incite people to be sober and consume less. And for us, that's one way also of pushing people to be sensible in their consumption. And that will control much more household consumption.
Yes, Veronica?
To add that from my perspective, the reply to your question is a clear no. We don't have yet enough water considerations concerning to regulations that apply at European Union level, but also I would say nationally on the built environment. And if you want to look at the half glass empty, you can say that we have literally missed certain opportunities in the past mandate, although I also want to acknowledge the effort by the European Parliament in particular to bring certain water consideration further into the energy agenda, consideration to which, of course, colleagues of the DGN have been forthcoming, and I really want to thank them for that. But there has been, again, an awareness raising process going on, even just over the last years. I'm happy that you, as an engineer, are asking this question, because I think that you are part of the problem and very much part of the solutions as well. I completely concur with the fact that nonetheless we should be looking at the picture as very vividly portrayed again by the colleagues of the European Environment Agency. Households today represent indeed 13% of the overall consumption of water, whereas agriculture 59%. So the comparison between the two is pretty clear. I'm all in favor of responsibilizing individuals. I'm all in favor to facilitate circular management of water in built environment. I see a bit of opportunities actually linked to the good implementation of the energy performance of building directive, because nothing impedes us to use the renovation wave connected to the energy transition to also stimulate more attention to water. We have some hooks in the drinking water directive, which are very, very important, because we have certain legal obligation for the member states. And for those of you who live in France or in Italy or in some in the countries that have particularly old buildings, there is an obligation to revamp all the canalization containing lead. Quite a challenge for a number of our older buildings. So this is coming somehow our way. But I agree, we should be doing more, but let's focus on those that today not only are biggest water users, but also don't pay really a price for water, because the households are the ones that more or less are really tracked by in a very granular manners. Those other bigger users, not so much. And I think this is a problem of fairness as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think the point about those who are often the problem also are essential for the solutions as well, as something that we really need to remember and keep close. And we have one more question here, I think. Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Unglaub from the Austrian Perm-Rep. I'm in charge of water affairs over there. I just have a very brief question in regard of the next commission's mandate. Has been mentioned by the panel, and we would be particularly interested in the mission letter to Jessica Roswell, Commissioner Designate, where we have stumbled across a term which is the so-called nature credits. And since she's also in charge of water affairs, of the water resilience initiative, we were wondering whether this concept of nature credit also enshrines water, or whether it's just primarily focusing on biodiversity or CO2 or other emissions. And just for my background, I work for the Ministry of Agriculture, but we also cover water. And yeah, voila, thank you.
Okay, and we have a second question as well on the left side of the room, so we'll take both.
Is it working? Yes. Hi, Elliot Guaron from FIPA Public Affairs, Independent Public Affairs Consultancy in Brussels. Thank you for this very interesting debate. My question relates to the role of legislation in creating industrial symbiosis, because we have been talking about the need to depollute, the need to recycle water. Of course, there are plenty of water-intensive sectors out there, and it has been already made in existing legislation to apply this polluter pays principle for certain sectors. I'm talking about the new Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. So my question relates to the future legislation, and it was mentioned that there would be some accompanying proposals to the implementation. So what would be the role of the water resilience strategy here? And my second question is, it was before referred to as an initiative and now as a strategy. Is there a difference? What does it mean? What are the implications in terms of what will come out from this? Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to say this is the last opportunity for any questions, if there are any final ones in the room. No, perfect. Then we'll turn to the panel, and Veronica, I think these are for you.
The chosen victim. So on when it comes to Commissioner Designate Jessica Roswell's mission letter and the nature credits, this is simply to recognize the fact that there is work ongoing to devise a mechanism that would incentivize those, say, farmers or, I don't know, agroforestry industries, etc., that are really trying to indeed put biodiversity, nature restoration at the center of their efforts, which is something that, of course, is quintessential to repair also our broken water cycle. So the link is there. The nexus is in particular with the nature restoration efforts. And this is something that I think is perfectly in line with what we hear also from the relevant actors. And we shouldn't only focus on this world, because I think SUEZ, for example, is a very good example as well. There where they operate and support municipal authorities and other to revamp their waste, water management systems, etc. I trust, and I've seen myself in certain cases, they're looking more and more into urban greening solutions as well. So this must always be part of this, holistic way of doing stuff. And the idea is to find ways through which the European Commission can incentivize and reward this type of efforts as well. But of course, the product is still not out there, so I cannot give you more details. Similarly, I will not be able to give you all the details that the second colleague was asking for. Why do we have by now a water strategy versus an initiative? What I can tell you from being first-hand witness to the fact the Water Resilience Initiative was conceived to be an attempt to give a first kickstarter of thoughts. It's only natural that now that the president is presenting the political guidelines for the next agenda, she really uses the word strategy, because ultimately what we want to build is a trajectory that enables the continent to go there where it has said it wants to be in March 2023. We have also instructions by the European Council that are telling Commission, come up with a strategy. So there is nothing new. Member states are united. The institutions, the other European institutions have been very united. The business world is very united. NGO representatives, civil society representatives are united. The Commission is there to try and help everyone in having a trajectory, hopefully with certain milestones that will inevitably link also to the much progress made with the legislation adopted in the past mandate to design a way towards better water resilience and identifying the gaps. Our past mandate effort also enabled us to tackle quite a bit of the water intensive sectors, because you've mentioned the urban wastewater, but in this context, I would particularly highlight the industrial emission directive. I mean, with its water binding performance target that apply to all the aluminium, all the ceramic, all the glass, all the, you name it, all the largest industrial manufacturing process of the EU, that other 11% of the water consumers that we see in the slide of the EA is very deeply tackled. And what we know for a fact is that when you touch the biggest industrial owners, naturally this has virtuous positive repercussions on their subcontractors, so the SMEs as well. So I think we are pretty well covered in terms of outlook, as Niels was saying, also from an energy perspective, for the, let's say, manufacturing side of the game. No time to rest on our laurels, but let's say we have an instrument that enables us to go where we want to go. I'm afraid to stress it once again, but I think the music is a bit different when it comes to agriculture, but we are enthused by the good result of the recent Stoschneider report. And we think also that there is a growing consensus among all parties that, especially in the name of water, we have to really find a unity of thinking and of solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to the end of the event, but just before we wrap up, and very quickly, and I mean very quickly. I'd like to just get each of the panelists quick overarching in one sentence. This is not easy to do, I will add. What you see as should be the main priority in strengthening water resilience, what needs to be seen to as a priority. And we'll start down to my far right, Olivier, to do that very quickly, just to wrap up our discussion. No pressure.
Yes, very quickly, I think it's finding the right balance between enabling multiplicity of solutions to emerge and finding a way to communicate across the continent, but also across the world, the existence of these solutions in order to enable them to be picked up, but not scaling up of a single silver bullet.
Thank you. Paul?
In one sentence is difficult, but obviously getting everyone to take action in this context of crisis to actually change things and realize that we have to change things and move towards much more protection of the resource, much more recycling. I think I insisted a lot about that. Generally think about how we can keep enough water for tomorrow and protect it and make it better and make it cleaner.
Veronica?
Realizing we are so deeply interconnected. And once again, nature is teaching it us all. In the report of the Global Economic Commission coming out today, they say that about half of world rainfall comes from healthy vegetation in ecosystem that transpires water back into the atmosphere and of course generates clouds that move downwind. China and Russia are the main beneficiaries of these atmospheric river systems, while India and Brazil are the major exporters because of their size of their lands. The Chinese economy depends on sustainable forest management in Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and the Baltic region. Do we need to say more?
I think not, but András?
Maybe a bit surprising.
Evaporation.
Our tasks, challenges, and things to do are almost infinitive. Every day we discover new challenges. Our resources are limited. The biggest challenge what I see for a next governing legislative organization, willing or not, they must take priorities. Priorities in two aspects. Select things what are feasible, what we can do according to risk, danger, urgency. The other one is the realistic feasibility. We come back to the classical Pareto 20-80 rule, whereby we hope that by spending 20% of our available resources, not only financial resources, I just mentioned to you, human resources, time, organization, money, environmental footprint. We spend environmental footprint to gain some other environmental footprint, which is hopefully lower than the spent one. So it's not a simple cost benefit. But we hope that by spending 20% of our resources, we have the gain of 80%. And we have to pick the low-hanging fruits. No choice. That's what I think.
Not quite one sentence, but thank you. And Niels, finally.
Thank you. Yeah, I think make it simple for people and authorities, companies to do the right thing by aligning the regulatory frameworks, the market incentives to the objectives we have, so that we not stop shooting ourselves in the foot, basically. Yeah.
that leaves me then to say thank you first and foremost to our panelists for your enriching insights this afternoon, which have been most wonderful. For those who joined us in the room and asked questions, thank you very much. And also to those who joined us online. This is a topic that's going nowhere. So it's something that I think we will work continuously on at the European Policy Centre. And I ask you to keep an eye out on our upcoming activities. A massive thank you to all of the colleagues who were involved in organising today's events, for bringing together such a panel of wonderful speakers, and also to our events and communications colleagues as well. It takes a team to put things like this together. So thank you very much to everyone, and have a nice evening.